Are you a parent navigating the challenges of your child's learning journey? Are you wondering how to make education more accessible and engaging? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Learning Disability Experts podcast, where we delve into valuable insights and strategies to support your child's different learning needs. I'm Jess, your guide on this journey.
Hello, everybody. So excited to have you meet my guest today. Veenu Keller is the child whisperer. Welcome, Veenu.
Hi, Jess. It's so great to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was on her show recently. And so if you want to hear me answering Veenu's questions, please go and check out her podcast channel. Share with everyone what it's called.
Redefine Parenting.
Thank you. And then we're going to have a great talk today about just the responsibilities of parents advocating for their kids and just parental pressures and just learning more about what is the child whisperer.
Well, this is great. I love talking about this subject because before I had to advocate for my own children, I advocated for my clients. I was a case manager for the county, and kids going into school at the age of 3, they were aging out of the infant and toddler program. And so I would go to the consortium and help these parents plead their case of why their kids needed services and what the services would look like with an IEP. And I never knew that I was going to have to be doing this for my own kids one day.
Wow. So usually it's the other way around.
Yes. Yes.
But you had preparation for your kids. That's awesome.
Yeah, I felt like God was like getting me ready.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Because for me, I had to learn by stumbling and figuring things out. And so my goal is to help parents know sooner than I did what to do, so maybe they can get better resources than I was able to get for my kids, or get the resources sooner. So this is amazing. So you used to work for the state and now you work privately, I assume?
I am an entrepreneur. I started my own company, Veenu Inspires LLC, back in 2009 or something like that. And from there, I've taken all the experience of being a case manager and infant toddler family specialist for the state of North Carolina for over a decade, taking all that experience, learning, and getting into coaching. And I've kind of put it all together and been able to help families through my coaching.
So what does coaching look like?
So coaching is definitely figuring out, where are you at? Where do you want to go? And how do we close the gap? We don't spend a lot of time in the story. We don't spend a lot of time in the victim of, poor me, my kids aren't listening, I don't know what to do. And then you give them help and it's like, well, they're still not listening and I don't know what to do. It is giving them strategies so they do know what to do. And they know exactly how to create the progress they want to see in their lives. And so we close that gap. And so, I had a lot of clients that came from therapy, and they were dealing with the emotions of anxiety and depression, and their kids isolating themselves and what that looks like, and the panic attacks. And I said, that's great, but what do they want to feel instead? And the parents would be like, well, I think they want to feel happy. And some kids didn't want that. Some kids wanted to feel peace. Some kids wanted to feel peace. They wanted to feel calm. They wanted to feel accepted. We have this perception as parents that our kids just want happiness, but happiness looks like so different for different people, and especially kids nowadays. And so with coaching, I'm able to work with the children. So it goes into my parent-child whisperer title, to really work with the child, ask them, what is it that they need in order to feel the way that they want to feel? And what is your parents not doing? Like, what's the formula that you need so you understand your parents? And then I coach the parents to ask them, what do they need? What would they want their kid to be doing? And what does that mean if they did do that? Your kid needs to make A's. Why? What does that look like? What does that mean to you if your kid made A's versus if they made C's? Well, they weren't a good student. I said, really? So a child that makes a C, that does all the work, turns in everything, is a great student according to the teachers, but they're making a C because it's hard for them to absorb the information. They're not a good student. They're like, well, I guess they would be a good student then. I said, okay, so then it's not about the grade that makes a good student. So I really dive into the meaning we're giving things and helping parents to reframe that so they can create a more open, safe, and trusting space for their kids.
That's awesome. So do you do this all online, or do you meet in person?
So I do it online. And there are times that, because I work with parents that have issues with their kids' schooling, a lot of it has to do with schooling, I sometimes Zoom in on conferences too. And I find myself advocating again for the families and talking to the teachers and helping the teachers understand that you can't cookie cutter kids. Every child learns differently. And, one of the things that I love about your program is that you bring in all the senses, you bring in the sensory learning, and you don't have to be autistic. You don't have to be dyslexic. It's understanding that we take in bits of information through all of our senses.
Right.
And we filter it. We delete, distort, and generalize different informations through the filters that we have, that we take in the information. And so if we were to assume that every child's a visual learner, what we miss out on the kids that are auditory learners or kinesthetic learners, and we're not giving them an opportunity to learn the information the way that they can really understand it and pretty much regurgitate it to make that A.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of times that I just zoom in on conferences with families too. I'm that person that any area you need me in life, I can support you on, whether that's the relationship, being on the same page with your spouse, your partner, getting your kids to listen to you and not have temper tantrums, getting you to understand why your kid's doing what in the school, and just really, again, creating that bridge.
So it sounds like it's like a funnel, not like a tunnel, the way you work with families.
I'm going to steal that. Can I steal that? I love it.
Yeah.
I create a funnel, not a tunnel. I love it. Yes, but yes.
Awesome. So, what do you help parents learn to be advocates for their children as well?
Absolutely. But I think the first thing about being an advocate for your child is to understand, what does your child need and want? What is it? Because what I think my child needs, and I was like explaining this to you earlier, I thought my child just needed to be able to read better and understand better and then they'll do better. And so I tried different types of tutoring, and they weren't bad. Like, they're great agencies. One of them helped my child read 6 levels in 6 weeks. It was beautiful. And what was sustainable though, right? And it's like, so I was like trying to get my kid to do this, and I would see them after tutoring and they would just feel so defeated, so depleted. And they're like, I don't want to do this. And I'm bribing them with candy bars, which I don't even like to do. But I was like, if you do great, you get a candy bar. And I started to notice that my one son, he was having more and more behaviors with them. I'm like, he doesn't even have behaviors. Like, what is going on? I was not listening to the cues that he was done with this. He was not getting what he needed from it. I was forcing him again because I, as a parent, thought I was advocating for what he needed instead of figuring out what he wanted. And now I know better, because if you know better, you can do better. And so, and I use my kids as my own example, because again, just because I'm a coach and I'm great at seeing other people's issues and opportunities, sometimes I'm blinded by my own, right? They're my blind spots. And so it takes people, like you, when we had that conversation, you're like, oh, well, this happens. And did you know? And I'm like, I didn't know. And we use all our senses. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think that's what my kids need. It's like, until I started to listen and really appreciate that's what they needed. And I asked my kids, I talked to them and I said, this is going to be different. And they said, how? And I said, give it the experience and you tell me how. And so now I'm listening to what they want. So now I can advocate for them, but I'm also teaching them to advocate for themselves. And I think that is important. I think we're living in a time in our lives, because I have 6 kids. My oldest is 30 and 26 are the 2 boys that I raised as a single mom. And back then, to now, I feel like more and more parents, we are wanting to help our kids not fail. So we're doing it. I have clients that do their homework for their kids. And I'm like, why would you do your homework? Like, my mom would never do my homework for me, and here's the deal. I have a 9-year-old client and he says, I wish my mom would stop doing my homework for me. Yeah. Kids don't want it. We think as parents, we're helping them. We're doing them a disservice, because we're not teaching them how to fail forward. We're not teaching them to have a voice to speak up for what they really need and want in their life, and teaching them how to advocate for them. We need to be the guide on the side to be able to let them be the hero. I say we need to be the Mr. Miyagi and let them be the Daniel-san.
Well, I never thought to ask my kids what they wanted. But my daughter talks about that. She has a baby and she's like, we're going to let her choose when she wants to pierce her ears, put holes in her body. And like, that's just kind of their thing with everything. They want to let her choose. And I'm like, okay, is she going to end up a spoiled brat kid, or is she going to end up a more well-rounded person? I mean, I guess only time will tell what the difference makes, because my kids weren't spoiled brats, but they didn't, as adults now, they're not as good at making decisions, I don't think, as they might have been had I not made so many decisions for them.
For them. Yeah. And I think it's important. The more we allow our kids to make choices, we're asking them, what is that choice going to mean to you? It's really getting them, because again, their frontal lobe's not developed. So I'm not saying let your kid make any choice they want and whatever. I call it controlled control. You're controlling the control you give your children. You're controlling the choices you give your children. And it's basic. It's like back to basics. Like we can have chicken and green beans, or we can have, hamburgers and French fries. It's not have whatever you want, have frozen pizza and chips for dinner. That wasn't an option. So I'm giving them the choice, but I'm letting them make the choice. So it's controlled. So it's like, with the ears pierced, like, I think you look great with your ears pierced. Would you like that? And then she makes that choice. I'm not ready. I don't want that. And then when she is ready, well, what would that mean if you got your ears pierced? It means that I would like it now. I want to see pretty earrings in my ears. And so, okay, well then let's go get it, because we have got to be the frontal lobe for our kids. They don't have the executive reasoning or the organizational skills that we have. They make a choice just off of what they think is going to happen today. They can't make the choice knowing what's going to happen in the future.
That's great advice. And what advice would you give parents who feel overwhelmed or unsure at how to start advocating and helping their child make their own choices and advocate?
So the first thing I would tell anyone is, do they advocate for themselves?
The adult.
Yeah. Do they advocate for themselves? Do they have a voice? Are they a pleaser because they're so afraid people aren't going to like them, or, no one's going to listen to them anyway? Because if you weren't listened to as a child, you probably are an adult that feels like you don't get listened to anyway. So you just kind of go with the flow. So there's no conflict. And so if you're not, our kids model what they see. My kids have no problem asking for what they want. You know why? Because I do all the time. I ask for what I want, and I advocate for them to ask what they want. And how do I do that? Is I promote that with them. I let them know. My son was saying the other day, well, I want to do this basket brigade. So I created this basket brigade here in Onslow County, North Carolina, with the Rotary Group about 4 or 5 years ago, where we actually buy $400 worth of baskets, like a turkey basket. So the turkey, all the trimmings, and we deliver 400 baskets to people in need in our area. And since I haven't been doing Rotary, we haven't really participated, but they continued the legacy. And so my son says, well, will you call the principal and ask if we can help out? Because some of the students went last year to help out. And I said, I absolutely could, but I'm not going to. And he's like, well, why not? And I said, because I'm not the one that wants to go during the day. He's like, no, I want you to email her from me. And I said, do you have her email? He's like, yeah. And I said, so you email her. And he's like, well, what if she says no? And I said, it's already a no because you haven't asked. And so I said to him, go ahead and email. So he emailed her, and he wrote her a beautiful email. And within 5 minutes, he got a response. She wrote me back. And she said, Samuel, if our school participates this year and we're taking students, we'll absolutely love to have you. He's like, oh my gosh. She said, yeah, that is teaching him how to advocate for himself. And sometimes it's going to be a no, but these yeses really help elevate. Like, I had a voice and I did it myself. And I told him, I said, that's the whole thing, is that you have to have a voice when something's not right. You have to have a voice when you want something and it's not happening for you. And that's how I teach my kids.
Well, that's great. And I love how you put it on him to do it. I mean, I gotta say, my youngest son's 23, and I just had him start writing his own emails, to his professors at college. Because
better late than never. Better late than never.
I mean, first semester, I think I wrote the emails for him.
But they're millennials, right?
No, he's Gen
Z.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it started in the millennials, right? Because what happened is, like, I did this with my kids. All the things that I hated growing up, I'm like, I'm not going to do that to my kids. I'm not going to do that to my kids. I didn't have I didn't make a lot of money. I was going to use some slang, but realized I should probably not. I didn't make a lot of money, but yet somehow I'd scrape up enough money just to have a cleaning lady at least once a month. So the kids didn't have to feel like they had to vacuum everything and stuff. They know how to vacuum. They know how to clean a bathroom. but it wasn't drilled into them like it was for me. You know, I didn't drill in, you got to get your homework done right this second, because that's what happened to me. There was more leisure for them. There was more, less, they don't think this way, by the way, but from the way I was brought up, less boundaries for sure. And I could have done it for the twins who are Gen Zs, but I realized like we're doing too much for our kids. We're not setting them up to win. You know, I need to, that's my whole thing, is how do I create healthy, happy, and independent children? You know, my friend is like all her kids, she's an empty nester. Do you know how rare that is to be an empty nester nowadays?
Oh yeah, I have 2 kids living at home still. Or again, you know. Yeah.
But the truth is like a lot of parents are keeping them home, and they're, oh, go to college. You could be at home and go to college. It's like, are we allowing them to spread their wings and be the adults we have trained them to be? I say this is our boot camp from the time they're born to 18. And then once they graduate boot camp, you got to use the skills I gave you. Go do it. And I'll cheer you on in the background.
Is your child struggling with school, feeling overwhelmed? Introducing 3D Learning Experts, your child's personal tutor. Our expert educators provide personalized, one-on-one support tailored specifically to teach to your child's learning style. We specialize in helping students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and similar learning challenges. Our tutors are trained to provide effective strategies for reading, spelling, writing, and math. With our innovative virtual platform, your child can learn from the comfort of their own home. No more commuting or scheduling conflicts. Give your child the boost they need to succeed. Experience the difference with 3D Learning Experts.
In your experience, where does the line between encouraging your child and doing for them, like, is there a specific age or what? When do you start teaching them these skills?
You know, I go again back to basics. It's, you know, we change our kids' diapers, then we potty train them, but we're still helping clean up. And then it's a slow transition to where they can finally clean up on their own independently. And it's the same thing when they're at school and they're getting homework. We're sitting down with them a lot and helping them. And then we gradually don't need to do that anymore because they have their routine and they get it. And then they know where to come get us if they get stuck on a problem, and we can help them. And it's a gradual thing. Encouragement is setting them up to win, letting them know they have the resources to find the solution to the problems that they have. And you might be that resource for them, and that is okay. But to sit there and do your kid's paper and then turn it in with their name on it, you are doing an injustice for them. You're getting the grade, you know? And it's like, I tell my kids, I would never do that because I've already done 6th and 7th grade. I'm not doing it again. You know, I have my husband who's dyslexic also. So he has a challenge. He has a big challenge when it comes to helping the kids, because I think it makes him feel like, I love your title, I'm not dumb, I'm dyslexic, but I think it makes him feel dumb that he can't comprehend, especially the way kids are taught nowadays, by the way. Like, they are not taught math the way I was taught math. And math was very confusing for me. Math comes easy for my husband. So that's the only thing he says that he'll do. He's like, I can do math with them. He's like, but when it comes to reading, English, writing, grammar, I'm out. He's like, I can't do it. I can't tell you how many arguments we got in during COVID because kids were homeschooled at that point. And our teachers would give the kids, you know, their assignment to do, and then they would do check-ins with them. My husband had to sit with them and literally do 8 hours. It was supposed to be 3 hours. It was 8 hours with the twins. And then I'm working, and he's like, I can't do this. This is driving me crazy, blah, blah, blah. Because it just, I think he just felt like he couldn't get it. Like, and he was not doing them a service. And it was so hard for us. I was so glad we did not stay. Like, we were only out of school until summer, and then we came right back in, thank God, to our private school. Yeah. Private school here in North Carolina started right back in July, like we normally do.
In July or September or August?
Well, we start in July because we're year-round school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we get out in May and we start back in July.
Okay.
Well, June 1st.
And do they do Common Core at your kids' school?
So yes and no. They give the foundations, like the blocking, like the tens, you know, how they use blocks like back then. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if they're doing Common Core or not. I mean, all I know is that they get these math problems and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You know, I mean, I used to just like cross multiply, have my space carrier and then add it all together. They don't do that. I don't know what they do, but they don't do that.
Because you don't know because he's helping them with their math?
They don't have homework. It's no homework school.
Oh, so you don't see anything they're doing?
Nope. 2 years ago, it turned to no homework. So they get their assignments, they do it in class, and then whatever they don't finish, they have to come and do it.
They have to come and do it where?
At home. It becomes homework, but generally the kids have plenty of time to do it during the school day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But my daughter, who has trouble with math, sometimes it's a challenge for her. And so again, I had to teach her to advocate that you need to raise your hand and tell the teacher, because the teacher said to me, he says, I could teach her something today. She can duplicate it and do it over and over. And then tomorrow she comes to school and it's like she's never seen it before. Like her brain has just lost, it lost the information. And he's like, and I have to reteach it to her. And then she says, I got it. And I think she says that because there's other kids listening and she doesn't want to feel dumb. She doesn't want to feel like left behind, and everybody else got it. So she needs to get it. And so I had to teach her how to advocate for herself. I did too, talk to the teacher. So that was a support, right? Like, I'm like, she needs to come to you, but I'm going to tell you what's going on.
So, does she advocate for herself in a classroom setting now?
She does. Yeah. She'll raise her hand. And he has talked to her about if she doesn't feel comfortable talking to him during class, when she can come talk to him and he'll help her.
Yeah, because that's a huge thing. I mean, it's peer pressure is real. And, even I think about that sometimes with accommodations, like what are the other students thinking when kids have an accommodation? Obviously, if they're not having to read out loud because reading is hard, the rest of the class knows that child never has to read out loud. So then it gives them a whole nother avenue to harass the child about.
And if they do read out loud, then they get harassed because they can't read with the fluency.
Right.
My stepdaughter's like that, and she's now 16. And this is the first year she's really doing good, her junior year. But every year was a struggle for her. Like, I advocated for her. I went to her mom and I'm like, you need to get her tested for dyslexia. Well, I think she has it. The school thinks she has it. I said, but there's no diagnosis, and who's helping her with it? It's killing her self-esteem. So, I mean, the struggle is real for sure.
So I wanted to talk about parental pressures, and I'm just wondering how to.
Well, we can, because I mean, I would like to say that when your child can't advocate for themselves, you have to be their advocate. You have to be able to speak for them. And there are times that I did that when I went with the kids that were going into the school system, and the school's like, oh, we're going to give them 15 minutes of speech therapy in group. And I'm like, what's that going to do? No, you tell them no. You tell them that that's not going to do anything. Because when you look at the outcomes that the IEP needs to meet, that's not helping them. And so teaching a parent to know their rights, teaching a parent it's okay to tell the school no. The schools aren't the professional that know it. You know your child. You should know what your child needs. Consult with people, professionals, like your tutoring business, like consult with people to say, what does my child need to be successful in school, and go tell the school. My kids, it's interesting that if we don't use the accommodations all year round, when it comes to the end of year testing, they can't use the accommodations.
Oh, really?
And I was like, oh, interesting. And the testing doesn't let them. If they're only allowed to use them if they, so when there is a big test, my twins are pulled out, but there's a group of kids that are pulled out, and they're in a smaller contained where they could spread out more environment. I mean, I think one of the things that my son stresses over is he feels rushed. Like he has to get everything turned in, he has to be the first one done. And he makes so many mistakes.
Oh, wow.
He makes so many mistakes, careless mistakes, because he's more concerned about getting it turned in than he is about taking his time to understand the question, comprehend it, and give the right answer.
Well, and when you were saying about they're pulled out in a smaller setting, another benefit of them being pulled out for testing is they don't hear the pencils dropping 20 minutes into the test, and they're only a third of the way done, because then that becomes a stressful pressure.
For sure. So yeah, and then so a lot of times there is pressure from other parents too, because you watch and you have other parents that have advocated and they got something, then you don't get it. And you're like, well, how come my kid didn't get that? Well, we had we asked for it. And then you go back and you ask for it. They're like, no, your child doesn't qualify for that. There's so much red tape about what qualifies depending on what state you're in, what the legislation's saying, and what the school district wants to say. I have friends that have sued the school district because they would not give the accommodations that their child needed.
Well, and those lawsuits become a very complicated mess. And we have a student who the parents sued the school twice, and the school does everything it can to avoid having to pay her back for the services that she had to pay in advance for.
Yep.
So it's like they'll do anything to avoid
Yeah.
having to put out the money. So I never thought about like the parent pressure in the sense of like the competing of the accommodations. For me, I always felt pressure of hearing the parents of the normies brag about their kids doing so well in school. And I never felt like I could brag like that. But it's interesting. I mean, I guess, pressure comes from everywhere.
It does. And that is true. Like I see people, their kids that are great. Like there's one student in my kids class who they've been with him since he was 3 years old. He's a prodigy. Like he's doing multiplication in kindergarten. He's reading like chapter books in first grade. Like he's just one of those kids. And I asked the mom, his mom actually went to school with my husband. I'm like, what did you do? What did you feed him? Like what vitamins is he taking? And at this time I didn't know my kids were dyslexic or had ADHD. And she goes, Veenu, we do nothing. Like, we don't know. We just praise him because he shows us what he can do. And he loves showing us what he can do, and spelling's not an issue. Like every subject he's so great at, and my kids, I just always taught my kids, like comparison steals your joy. Don't compare yourself to other kids and what they're doing. Like you'll never be him, just like he'll never be you. And he has those gifts. You have other gifts, and some of the gifts don't get to come out at school.
Right.
And so, but you have to know you have your own gifts. So don't compare yourself to other people. And they get stuff from different students, like, oh, you're so slow, or we already were told that. Why are you asking again? And I tell my kids, I said, speak up and say, well, I'm glad that you understand it. I don't. So I'm going to ask the question.
Yeah. Well, and my oldest child is my only child without dyslexia, dysgraphia, or dyscalculia. And he was reading on an 8th grade level by 2nd grade. So, all 4 of my children have the same mother and father, but that one was the only one who didn't have any of those academic challenges. However, he always had like social challenges. So, it's one or the other, or not necessarily one or the other, but we're all going to have our strengths and our weaknesses, like you said. So in this world that kids are growing up in right now, there's so much overwhelm. There's so much pressure of school. What do you tell parents when their kids are feeling overwhelmed?
Well, the first thing is to understand the signs, because kids may not show overwhelm the way we show overwhelm. Like we get stressed out, we might yell, we might be rushed, we might ignore. There's different outlets that we use when we're overwhelmed. So kids will a lot of times withdraw. Kids will get quiet. You might find what we call panic attacks or anxiety. And it's their body trying to really advocate that something's not right here. Like I've loaded up to the top. There's like, you can't put anything else in. And so when we see these things, it's not jumping to the conclusion like, oh, my kid has anxiety, let me go give them anxiety medicine. It's looking at their day. Kids are more busy today than they've ever been. I remember a couple years ago, or even last year, trying to get my kids to find time to get them tutoring because it was soccer, it was dance, it was cheerleading, it was singing, it was like every day something was. And I'm like, okay, something's got to give here because we got to fit this tutoring somehow. And I was like, wow, like they're more busy than I am. And when are we giving them time to be kids and just play and just play? So that's kind of what I also do with my family. It's like I teach them to allow their kids to be kids, allow them to have that free time and to download their brain and not feel overwhelmed, and to creating plans to help kids, like structure helps kids to stay not out of the overwhelm. It really does. So I think structure really helps.
So structure, but also an opportunity to just be kids, because if you structure too much, then it's like you're saying, they don't have time for
Right.
anything.
Well,
And
part of the
it's,
structure is that free time for them.
oh, okay.
Yeah, like structure it in there, right? Like if we leave it up to them, it's like, oh, and then they play and then they don't ever want to stop playing. Well, structure it. Like let them know and give them that anticipatory guidance of you got 10 more minutes, 10 more minutes. So wrap it up. Because a lot of times I'll tell my son, I'm like, okay, it's dinner time. He's like, no, I'm almost done. Let me just finish this thing. So what I learned from that is dinner's ready in 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes, I don't want to hear you wrapping it up. Now is the time to wrap it up. You know, so it's giving that anticipatory guidance also helps kids.
That's great advice. And how can parents motivate and support their children without contributing to their anxiety or fear of failure?
Ask them what they want.
It,
Ask them what they need.
so
Like,
that's literally the answer to everything is
yeah,
communication.
yes. What do you want? What does that look like? What could I do to support that for you? If you wanted that to happen, what do you need me to do to help you get that to happen?
Do you feel like society's expectations and comparisons contribute to the pressure parents and place on their children?
I think parental pressure does that. It's you go to school and one kid has an iPhone. Why can't I have an iPhone? Because you're not how to have an iPhone. And then another kid comes to school and he has Snapchat. Well, can I get no, we don't do social media in this house when you're kids. Absolutely not. And then it's like kids think that they're equal to you. Well, you do social media. Yeah, I have a business to run. Social media is how I do my business, and it's like we're constantly having to justify with our kids more and more because they're exposed to the World Wide Web. We didn't have that when I was growing up. We were only exposed to what we heard on TV, which was the Brady Bunch, or Leave It to Beaver. Or we were exposed when we played outside and other people's parental values were in their children and they would say things to us. That was it, unless we read like Teen Bop magazine or People magazine. Like that was our influence. Now kids know about things way too young because it's at their fingertips.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. My grandbaby's only 9 months old, and if I'm on my phone communicating with my assistant, she like her eyes zoom right to the phone. I try to put the phone behind her, and she's still like she can feel the heat or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's crazy how early on they just are so attracted to all of the World Wide Web.
Well, I think there's going to be some phenomenon when someone's going to do the research, which is not going to be me, by the way, but when somebody else does, is that we're using phones while they're in utero. They're hearing these sounds because babies hear, they're hearing the sounds. They're getting kind of ready for it, if you would. I bet you there's going to be some correlation.
Yeah, my daughter was saying something about that when we were talking about it last week. And I was like, oh no, how can they tell? But I guess, they used to say have dad sing to the stomach so that they would recognize dad's voice. And
Yep. And so they hear sounds from the phones and the computers. And, now like even my granddaughter, it's like, if we need her entertained, just my daughter-in-law gives her her phone. It's like, oh, I tried to call you. Oh, I gave the phone to her because I was shopping and I just needed her to like watch her show or something. Like we use
how old
it.
is she?
She just turned 7 yesterday.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah. But even like my grandson, who's 9 months old, like we're sitting next to him and I'm like scrolling. He's like, his eyes are like right on my phone, just like you were saying. It's like he knows, his sister's watching Bluey or something on her mom's phone, and he is like all entertained watching that too. So we have done that, and it's like we have trained our kids this way. By the way, we've trained the brain to get instant gratification, that little dopamine hit by playing video games, watching TV, watching these things on YouTube. Even schools use YouTube now to teach.
Well, I can't say much about that because when I was homeschooling my kids, we used YouTube for science because I didn't like teaching science.
Look, it is a great resource.
Uh-huh.
I'm not knocking it. I mean, there's things that are inappropriate and there's things that, that are like, I tell my kids, I'm like, you're allowed to watch YouTube as long as it's a how-to video.
But yeah, I've heard so many teachers as of late say that they can't get the kids to listen to them in the classroom because they're all on their phones. I mean, I remember 15 years ago, not even 10 years ago, 12 years ago, how kids weren't allowed to have their phones. They
At
weren't.
our school, they're not allowed to. Like they're not allowed to bring their phones to school. So there's no phones anymore because a lot of the parent pressure is like, oh, I'm watching Instagram. How are you watching Instagram? Oh, so-and-so has an iPhone and we watch it at recess. You're not watching Instagram at recess. Like if I wanted you to be on Instagram, you would have a phone with Instagram. Like, no, you're not. Like my kids have Apple computers, but they have no apps. They have no social media apps. My daughter finally asked for a Pinterest and I said, yeah, because she likes to look at the aesthetics of clothes and makeup and stuff like that. I'm fine with her having a Pinterest, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess YouTube is social media too. So they have YouTube.
But I mean, they're not really communicating unless
They're not
in
They're
the
not.
comments section going back and forth.
Right. Right. And I'm going to tell you, it's social media where our kids are learning to compare. Like girls are
Right.
looking at the girls going, oh, they're so beautiful. I wish I was like that. And it's creating, what is depression? Depression is focusing on what you don't have or what you wish you had. That's depression.
Mm-hmm.
And people can't get out of it because all their thoughts, they loop of what they don't have and how they want it and whatnot. And that creates the depression. You can't be in gratitude and be depressed at the same time. Because if you're in gratitude, you're grateful for what is happening, what's been presented to you. You're not depressed for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute your mind goes right back into that depression, then you're depressed. And that's what's happening to our kids. Like right now, we are literally on a sabbatical from screens because we've noticed the tonality has changed in their voice. The way they talk to us has changed in their voice. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to get it back. And I'm like, it's not about you being nice. It's about recognizing your tonality when you're speaking to adults. If I, as your parent, can't teach that to you, then who's responsible? Because mm-hmm. right now we still got 6 years of this boot camp and this is like where we learn. And I'm going to be honest, like I have clients that they're so close to their parents. They literally do tell their parents almost everything. And then when it comes down to it, though, when we're talking, they don't want their parents to be their friends. They want their parents to be parents mm-hmm. and put boundaries and tell them no. Absolutely. And my client's like, I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, but it's like, what I'm feeling. Like, my parents are like, oh, you did that? Okay, well, you don't have to do that because we're going to let you do it. And so it's more of a friendship than it is a parentship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was raised with my mother was my friend, and so I learned when I was raising my children not to do that. Like at stages in life, you have certain roles, and so now that my children are adults, I would like to be friends with all of them. However, I mean, even that relationship can only go so far because there's always that parent-child dynamics that comes mm-hmm. back into play.
Well, I'm like that with my boys. Like we have great discussions. We will laugh about things, like like I said, one's 26, one's 30. So like, there's no, like, I can't talk to you about this. You're not old enough. Like their frontal lobes have developed. Like they're good. Like mm-hmm. we have great discussions now, but there's also time that I'm the mom. There's times I'll call them out. I'm like, watch your mouth. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I don't care how old you are. You watch your mouth. And they're like, oh, and it kind of just like puts them back in place. And sometimes with the discussion while having, I'm like, remember, mom, la, 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 la. I don't want to hear this. I'm still mom, So it's knowing those. But you're right. As they get older, our relationship changes because they do understand more. They are living on their own. Like both my boys have their houses. They live on their own. They have their jobs. One has a family, so we get to talk about certain things. Mm-hmm. But here's what I know, that when something happens, I'm the first call they make. Because I know I'm their mom and I got them.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, what is a piece of advice you wish parents could hear about connecting and understanding with their children?
So what I say on all my shows that I do is be curious and not critical.
I like that.
Be very curious and not critical. When we come with a tonality of judgment and criticism, our kids come back with a tonality of defensiveness. And that's where we get that attitude. And I'm hearing myself, by the way, when I'm saying this, because sometimes I need that reminder as well, but it's true. And so if we come across more curious, then we create that open, safe, and trusting space where they don't feel judged. So they'll want to tell you more and they'll know that you're there to support them, not judge them. Because Because if you're judging them, you can't influence them.
I think that's going to be my next tattoo. Be curious, not critical. I love
Love
that.
it.
Thank you so much, Veenu, for taking the time to be on my podcast and share your knowledge with my audience. And I really look forward to you being part of my tutoring community as well, and look forward to seeing your kids really blossom.
Me too.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.